I got this all cleaned up. Looks real good. Just, you know, it's still a little bit what I call rough, but it's a nice profile now. I had made this truss rod previously. It's been sitting here for quite a while, and I stuck it down in there, and now I can't get it back out, of course, on camera. And anyway, it's profiled with the slight underbend in it, and I have put it on here and adjusted the nut to about where I think it should be. It's a full thread right there, and then I put 2 pencil marks right behind the nut, so I'm going to cut a straight down cut right behind that so that the nut will and the washer will have something to set against. And I shouldn't make these fit so snug because I can't get them out. There you go. So I'll just do that all by hand with the Dremel tool. I'll show you what that looks like. Typically I cut this with a different cutter, but I'm going to try this squared off big round cutter. The negative of using something this big is that it'll grab and pull, and so I've got to be more sturdy with it. But I'll try it first. If it works, great. If not, I'll be switching it very quickly. As you can see, that worked pretty well, so I'm happy with that. That'll probably just be temporary, and it's probably undersized, but that'll get me going. It's the next day, my friends, and I recommend the vacuum pressing system very highly. The thing I'm still not exactly 100% on yet is the drying of these things in there. It seems to take much longer for the glue to cure in there, for sure. Like I've unwrapped the saran wrap around this, which may be the issue, the saran wrap. But this is still a bit tacky like, and you can even feel a bit of dampness in it, if you will. But it seems to have pressed it together incredibly well. I don't think you could do any better. You know, the edges don't look great because there's glue squeeze out and all that, but it looks perfect. When I can tell that it's absolutely the way I want it. So anyway, bottom line is I'm still working through the issues on using the vacuum pressing system, but it is a fantastic product in terms of clamping. Man, there's nothing that compares to it. Yeah, so if you need to clamp up flat pieces of laminate or any kind of laminate, especially laminates, but you can clamp other things too with it, but anything that can be held down with a, by sucking the air out of that bag, man, I'm telling you, vacuum pressing systems is the way to go. So I'm going to let this cure another day, and I will then cut it up for parts to be used in that guitar. I'm getting ready to make the side trim for this binding right here that I'm going to use on the end joints of that guitar. So I've got the small blade in the old bandsaw, and I'm getting ready to saw some of that. I'm going to use this as a backer. I'm going to slide this in here, and of course that's already been used, so I'll slide this side in here, and we'll do that. You might wonder what the backer does that keeps the tear out from tearing the wood out on the back side. So I was able to get 2 real nice pieces out of there. The third one is a little questionable, but third one could even potentially be used. But these 2 should work really well, and that's more than I'll need. Really, I think this one piece is all I actually need, so just one of these on here is really all that I'll require. At least that's my thinking at the moment. Hopefully that's focused in where you can see it. So there you go. Got my jig out here to glue up this little purfling to the edge of this binding strip. And when I started putting this in here, I mean, I've always known this wasn't perfectly straight, but it was driving me crazy because it wasn't pushing this up tight. And to be truthful, it's still not perfect, but it's better than it was. I took this off, ran it through my sander a little bit, and tried to straighten it out a little bit more. And when I say sander, I use the belt sander. I just laid it on there and just kind of moved it around and tried to get it as flat as I could. It's a little bit curved in here, so the middle of this is not getting as tight as I want it. I made this wedge and I ran this thing through my joiner to get this edge just perfectly straight. And now I can run this in here and it wedges this up pretty tight. So, like I said, right in the very middle here, it's still not as tight as it could be. So I'm going to put some razor blades in here wherever I need to tighten up the joint. But I got to get to it here. You would think this would be simple, but nothing's ever simple. So I'm going to go ahead and I think I'll put this wax paper on here to keep from making too big of a mess. And maybe I'll get it kind of pre-folded so that I can get this all in here with the glue on it. Just kind of pre-fitting it up to get the wax paper to kind of shape to this. Seems pretty good. Yeah, that's going to work pretty well, I think. It does fit. You'd be surprised how that clamps it up. This wedge, pushing that wedge in there, boy, it gets tight now. See, like I said though, there's still a few loose spots. I've got my Titebond 3. I want to make sure I get my best edge. This is the smoothest edge on this binding, so I want to make sure I get that against this. Anyway, let's get started. Obviously this binding is a little longer than my jig, but I think I can, figure out ways to clamp the trailing edge. Hopefully wipe up any extra glue that's spilled out here so that my wedge doesn't glue to my purfling. That wouldn't be fun. But we'll see how it goes. That's in there pretty tight, and the only thing I'm going to do now, because I know this middle is not that tight, is to put a few more things in here to tighten it up, and that seems to be working. Several more old razor blades here that I use for purposes like this. They're just good shims for little things like this. It just seems like everything's straight, but it's still, I guess this plastic just has enough give in it that it just doesn't work as well as I thought it would. I may need to, but the thing I like about the plastic for this jig is that the glue doesn't stick to it. So, it's got its good and its bad points. It's just a little bit flexible. I probably ought to put more screws in it to keep it from moving. That might help. It's pretty tight in some places and just not that tight in others. Like right in the middle here, it's just not that tight. So I think that fixes it though. And then the last thing I need to do is just clamp up this last little end back here. And I'm not sure how I'm going to do that, but I'm not going to worry about it too much. I think it's going to be fine. I think that's as good as I can do. So I'll let that set up a couple hours and we'll move on to the next step. While I'm waiting for my binding and purfling to cure and dry for these edges here, I thought I might as well start cleaning this up and getting it ready for that. I've already cut this off square so that the other piece of binding that's going to go around here can butt up square. But the detail of this is going to be something on the order of this. This purfling has to be cut at a 45 right here. So this part of the purfling has to be removed. The new binding comes up here, and that purfling gets cut on a 45 also. So that, in other words, the purfling travels around this like so, and around this one like so. And there'll be no purfling across this ends because there'll be a filler strip in there where that goes. And it should look okay. The operative word is should. But there's a lot of, there's some misalignment here. Not really misalignment exactly, just different in thickness. And so we just need to clean that up and sand it and stuff. So I'll just get that ready. I think the closer I can get it, so that way everything else that I fit up will work better, I think. This is some of the old sandpaper. I'm just using it up. I'm trying to get rid of all this old sandpaper so that I don't have to use it ever again. It loads up so bad it's really not worth using anymore compared to the new stuff. But for little things like this, it's not bad to just use it and get rid of it.
The day I met her.
Anyway, that's getting close. It's not perfect, but it's getting there. And I'll show you how I work on the next part of that. I'm going to at least mock up, if I don't go ahead and cut it, I am definitely going to mock up how I think this should look. I've got to come off of the corner of this joint right here, and I would rather cut it proud than too small, so I'll make a pencil mark and I'll be sure that that mark stays, every bit of it, because you can always trim it some more, but you can't add it back in there very good, especially when it's striped like that. So I've got a 45 mark there. Now I just need to get rid of this purfling up to that mark. That may not be that easy to do. I'm not exactly sure how I'm going to do that. You know, my Dremel is always an option for me. That works pretty good. I could get rid of most of it with the Dremel and then start shaving it down with other things. And I think that may be where I'm headed. Don't know how much of this you'll see, and I hope you don't see a grown man cry. That's mainly what I hope you don't see. Trying to get it in a comfortable position that I can control everything. You would think, well, putting it in a vise or something would be better, but really for me, putting it between my knees where I can get a hold of it here, get it in a comfortable height and grip. Let's see what happens. Here we go. Well, that did a pretty good job knocking out a lot of the bulk. It's not anywhere near finished. See, I didn't hit the white anywhere, and I didn't go past my line, so far we're all good. And this chisel's pretty darn sharp. I might just dress it up a little bit. Looks like it might even have a little glue on it and stuff, so I think I'll clean this chisel up just a little bit to get in there and really do the detail work. I touched up the old chisel there on the whetstone and leather, and it is crazy sharp now, so it should just peel this right off of there. And I'm trying to cut basically the glue joint between the purfling and the white binding, and it seems to be working. Now the trickier part is cutting that 45. It looks like that came out of there really well. I got that all, so that's all cleaned up to there. Now I got to get the 45. Now the problem with that is this blade is wider than the 45. So I'm going to have to find an even tinier chisel to cut this 45 here. So good luck finding that, but I'll see what I can come up with. I got a hold of one of my little cheap Chinese chisels that I have ground down narrow over the years, and it still wasn't quite narrow enough for this task, so I just ground it down a little bit narrower, sharpened it up. It's really sharp right at the moment, so that should be good to make this cut. And I think it's just the right size for this now. I don't know if you saw the video on my bow restoration that I did for a fiddle earlier on. It may have been quite a while. By the time you see this video, that video may be old. I don't know. But I will tell you that this kind of detail is tedious, but nowhere near as detailed as restoring that bow. And if you don't know what I mean by bow, I'm talking the violin bow, fiddle bow. One guy in the comments on that video said, you can't call that a fiddle, it's a violin. And I said, well, if Itzhak Perlman can call it a fiddle, I would think I could call it a fiddle. That's what he calls it. One of the finest violinists in the world. I can still see my pencil mark just a little bit. Don't know how well this is going to translate there, but I think you can see the 45. So the other 45 is going to come down this way, and then we'll have a small filler strip in between. So it's looking pretty good so far. I'm pretty happy with it right now. Type Bond recommends an hour in a clamp like this. I'd say it's been pretty close to an hour since I put this in there. It's a guideline, right? I think it's good enough. It's had access to air to dry, so that makes a lot of difference too. So I think it's going to be fine. I'm going to take it out of here so I can keep moving on. That looks pretty good. I think it's going to serve my purpose. At least I believe it will. So we'll move on to the next step. Well, off camera, my friends, I cut the little 45 on the mating piece here. It's got little fuzzies on it, but anyway, it's cut there. And I've done a little bit of fitting up, and let me see if I can show it to you there. That's kind of what it's going to look like. Maybe you can see that. Looks pretty good. Now this piece is a little thicker than it needs to be right now, so it's standing up proud of the other. And it's also a little wider across the white this way. And so I'm going to have to narrow this down a little bit to make it match this binding here. But otherwise, yeah, looking pretty darn cool, and I think that 45 angle around there is going to look pretty neat. So basically we're framing this in. Now the question is, and my able-bodied assistant is the one who posed the question, do I want to put this piece in before I put this bottom piece on? And so I'm going to do what I call Einstein thought experiments on this. And Einstein was famous for doing thought experiments, and he would think the whole problem through every step of the way, and he was able to figure out the answer in his head. And I know you're probably thinking, well, you're no Einstein and all these kinds of things, but the truth is, that's how I do a lot of my work, is I think it through. I sit down and I go step by step in my head, and I try to think through all the different processes that are going to happen. And that's what I'm really going to do right here, right now. So now I'm going to think through whether I want to try to put this piece in here or whether I want to put this other piece of binding in first. It's a real good thought. I'm glad Caleb posed that, because I hadn't really thought through that part yet. So now I will. Now that I've got this end all cleaned up and set in place, I've also started this one. You can see I put the bevel on there already. I think you can see it if the camera will just cooperate. But anyway, the bottom there has been beveled. I left it long so I can cut it back some more later. But it gives you the hint of what it's going to look like. I'm dreading, I'll be very honest, I'm dreading putting this piece on here. Now I've wet it down twice and let it set because I bent this a week ago and now it's dried hard and it's gotten, you know, it always flexes back, so it's not really bent perfectly right now. So I'm kind of dreading trying this. I think it's going to work though. Softening it up with the water a couple of times I think has helped. So all we can do is try it and hopefully avoid catastrophe. Really do not want a catastrophe here. So I'm just going to put the glue on here, and I'm actually using the Titebond 3 partly because I've got this wood kind of wet. I don't know that that'll make a difference though. But anyway, I don't want it to come loose, so the Titebond 3 is a good choice. And I'm going to smear this on here. I want to get a good coat of it on there. And let's just see what happens. We'll start putting it in place and taping her down and see if it rewards us or if it punishes us. And you never know until you start these kinds of things.
In the fall, in the fall.
Well, that worked better than I thought it would work. Honestly, it really did. That's one of the few times where I've gotten surprised to the positive side. That really worked out nice. Wow, I'm happy with that. I do think it probably re-cracked again under the binding, under the tape right here. I can kind of see it now. It looks like it's relaxed. But I think I have a way to fix that too. I'm going to put a longer piece on this and try to push it in as hard as I can and pull it just to do what I can for it, but I can't really do anything for it firmly yet, I don't think. I can feel it right there. I knew that's where it was cracked. It didn't crack while I was bending it, but I think it's released since then. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to actually take something here and kind of burnish it under the tape where that little crack was to just kind of make it form. I'm just going to force it like for a little while, and I really think that'll make the difference later. It won't probably keep it there while the tape's there right now, but I think it will make it easier for me to CA glue it later and fix it, and I don't think you'll ever see it. I was able to fix one on the other side and you can't see it, so there you go. I think that's going to work. Pretty happy with that. I'll tell you what, that curly maple is hard to bend and make it conform. But I think we did good, so I'll probably let that set till tomorrow because that was really hard on my hands. I seriously don't think I could do another one today. Well, as you can see, the binding got on there and everything worked out really well. And I'll be honest, there's a little bit of a boo-boo right here where it had broken during the bending process. But I think I'll be able to work that out and get that straightened up. One way or the other, I'll get it straightened up, but right now it looks kind of ugly. The rest of it worked really well. It's real tight, looks good. The only thing is I need to knock it down a little bit. It's a little tall. It's a little tall to the surface. So I got my finger plane here. I might even have to take a minute and sharpen it again because I've been using it quite a bit and haven't sharpened it in a while. But so far it's cutting it pretty well. But anyway, I'm going to just do that for a while. I'm not going to show the whole process because it just is just a whole lot of this. There's a lot of glue right in places too that I'll have to clean up. But we'll get it all straightened out and then I'll show you the next step. Well, I was just over at the bending table and I bent this piece. And this curly maple does not like to bend. And it kind of just laughs at you when you try to bend it. You kind of have to make friends with it. So once I finally got it in the sort of the shape I wanted, I thought I'd just go ahead and tape it to the body. Caleb did that on his and it seemed to work pretty well. You know, the plastic bindings and the sycamore binding, you can just horse them into place, but this stuff here is much different. You don't do any horsing with this. You better finesse it into place or it will crack and break all over the place. So it's already cracked one place, I'll be honest, right here, but I think I can fix that. 1 or 2 cracks is not a huge problem if you take your time with it and figure it out. But you can make them where they just disappear, really. But if you get, you know, a lot of cracks or if it breaks completely in two, that's a different story. Okay, so I'm going to go bend this other one now, and I'll show you what that looks like here in a minute. Well, I got the second piece bent, and I'm going to go ahead and tape it up as well and let it just set. It'll probably set a day or two like this.
Now I kneel by her graveside in the valley.
Quite honestly, I'm having trouble with this tape sticking. It's, like I said, most of this tape has been used once already. So I'm going to wrap it with some rubber also, and just to kind of hold it for the next day or so. This rubber band is very good for this, but takes a little getting used to because it's got a lot more spring back than the inner tube does. The inner tube is actually really easy to wrap around this. And this is not, I wouldn't say difficult to wrap around here, but it has so much more spring back that you really have to keep a firm grip on it because it will get away from you in a quick minute. And I got to get this last knot out of there. And I'm also kind of wondering how I'm going to tie it off, but maybe I'll just tie it off by wrapping it around itself in here somewhere. Throw a couple of half hitches on there. If you know what half hitches are, they're your friend. So there you go. That'll help hold it. The tape was not doing the best job, but that'll keep it in shape there for a day or two before I get back to gluing it in there. It's been several more days since I've worked on this last Hurrah guitar, and I'm getting ready to put the back binding on. And if you remember, I am returning the binding down both edges of this slot in the back that you can't see on camera, of course. But before I glue this in, I thought it would be best if I go ahead and mark this and cut out a little bit of that return so I don't have to do so much later. I'm going to mark it proud of what I need, meaning that I'm going to leave plenty of meat here that I can always chisel away later, but it'll get most of it out of the way. And so I'm just going to mark it accurately here. Then I'm going to look at it and make sure that I'll have enough meat there. Yeah, it should work out just fine. So for the most part, what I'm doing is I'm cutting a 45 right across here, and I'm going to get rid of this much binding right here. And to do that, I think the easiest way is set up the little vise here, and then maybe I can hold it in the vise and saw it. Now, it's on the wrong side for you to see what I'm doing, but I think you get the idea. Then I think probably the best way to do this part is to sneak up on it with a chisel. And I'll just get the little 1/4-inch chisel out and just start knocking off little pieces here and there. Well, actually, it kind of got rid of most of it in one fell swoop, but I got rid of most of it right there. You can probably see that. But it did leave the walnut there on the bottom, and we got to get rid of that too. We want it to be down to maple, so might as well just go ahead and knock most of that off while I'm doing this. Again, I'm just sneaking up on it, looking for the white to start to show through, and it's starting to just barely show through there. So I'm just turn it around this way and cut off the rest of it. And that may be close enough, I think. I'll just scrape it a little bit, clean it up. Yeah, that worked out real nice. So that's what I mean by sneaking up on it. You just knock off the worst, you leave the detail, and then you can scrape and work with the little detail by hand. I think we're probably ready to go ahead and get that glued in place. Yep, I'm pretty sure we are, so I'll get set up for that here and I'll show you what that looks like. Okay, I think I'm ready to get started. I've got the glue bot cleaned out before I turned the camera on. Isn't that amazing? I went ahead and ordered some new tips and new caps for this thing this morning, but yeah, when they show up, who knows. Right now I got to deal with what I have. Got the glue on here. This is just standard tight bond. And I've got it marked as to where I need it to start here. That all looks good. Got a little bit of water off camera here to just wipe up the extra. The only problem with the water on this is that it messes up the tape, so you can't use much water to clean this up until you get your tape stuck down. I don't know. It's one of those deals where you just kind of have to weigh it all out and just do what you got to do. I'm going to proceed slowly as I go around this. Try to keep it as tight as I possibly can. This maple binding really doesn't like to, conform to the exact shape. It likes to just stick out as much as it can, Fortunately, I held this binding in place and let it dry this way, so it shouldn't be too difficult, but on the other hand, it never works real easy. This always looks easier on video than it is, actually. This is actually pulling and stressing your fingers pretty much to get this tight and pull it in there. And with the arthritis in my hands, it really does put a number on your fingers, let me tell you. I like to pull every so often from the opposite direction. I feel like that puts more pressure down. This one going from the bottom up puts more pressure in. And coming from the top down puts more pressure down on the binding. So you got to do both.
The lonesome crickets call. Can't help but cry and remember.
I'm going to tear off some more tape, and I'll show you what this all looks like when I get her finished up. I've got to made up these two end pieces right here, and Yeah, it's just giving me fits because when I kind of molded this to the top, I wrapped that rubber band around it. Well, the rubber band pulled it in right here because this was overlapped, and it made a kink in this. So anyway, I put my inner tube on this whole thing to just kind of hold this binding in place temporarily so I can mark this where I got to cut it off. I need for this to be very accurate in a very airtight space. And so what I'm doing is I've already marked it, and I'm going to cut it off, and I'm going to cut it off proud like always, but just barely proud. And then I'm going to sneak up on it hopefully and get it to match up and be absolutely perfect. Okay, the first thing I can do this way is look and see if the joint looks right. It's long, I can tell because it's pushing it out right here. But the angle and all that looks pretty good, so I think we're in pretty good shape that way. The one that's already there looks to me like it needs a little bit of trimming. So I'm going to knock a little bit of it off on the inside edge. The outside looks okay, but the inside looks like it needs a little bit of trimming, just barely. It makes it butt up even just a little bit tighter. Boy, it doesn't need much off of there to be right, I don't think. Might be able to do it with a file. I think that'll probably do it. Now I'm going to mark it on the inside here for that piece I have to cut out. And I think this binding's standing up a little tall of this side all the way around here, so I think I'm going to run this through my thickness sander on its edge and knock that down just a little bit too. That's a little tricky to do, but I think I can do it. So I'm going to cut this little 45 and this little trim out like you saw me do before. I'm not going to show that. And maybe knock this edge down a little bit, and then we're going to glue this on here and get this binding finished. I'm going to try a different method for putting this binding on. I'm going to use a little bit of tape to get me started, but then I'm going to just wrap the whole thing with this inner tube and see if that works. I used to do it with a wrap for many, many years, really, before I started using the tape. The wrap I kind of like a little better. It seems to me to be a little more solid, and I kind of think the inner tube is even going to be the best of both worlds, but I don't know, we'll find out. I'm just going to go ahead and put the glue all the way around here because once I get going I won't have time to stop. Inner tube has to go the whole thing, I think. So let's see what happens. I'm gonna start it right here, and I'll put a little tape on here to kind of help hold it until I get going.
Day I lost my Melinda in the fall. My sweet Melinda of the mountain.
Okay, you notice I didn't glue this part up here yet, and the reason is I got a little crack in this, and I wanted to kind of put a brace on this. Right here, the binding is actually cracked just a little bit, and I think I can fix that by clamping it. And of course the clamp has to not cooperate and be just the right length to be the wrong length. I think I'll put a piece of leather in here to help force that wood in. I also made a little bit of a
dumb mistake right here. I ended up cutting it a little short. So I'm actually going to have to put a piece in there. The neck's going to cover most of that, and I don't think you're going to see it because I'm going to make it just as tight as it can be. But oh, it's so aggravating to just do stupid things sometimes. I was in a hurry here trying to do this all and just wasn't thinking. I was thinking I had the neck joint there and I could just cut it off any length I wanted, but turns out not so much. I really should have left this one longer. Oh well, I'm not perfect. I'm going to get some more stuff here to glue this up with. I might just use tape on this little bit. I don't know. It doesn't feel like it's pulling in tight enough, so I may use a combination of tape and the rubber band. So I'll get some additional rubber band. Well, I believe that's going to get it. I had an extra piece of rubber band and wrapped it around here. Everything worked really well. Actually, I think the rubber band probably pulls it in tighter than the tape does. I might just start doing it that way from now on. It's a little bit awkward having to spin everything around. If I had it in a holder or something where I could just wrap the rubber around it, that would be a little easier probably. The only mistake I made was cutting this a little too short, and as I mentioned, I will piece a piece in there, and I'm fairly sure I can fix that. I can't believe I did that. Kind of a rookie mistake, but that's what happens when you're just kind of thinking about too many things at once. It's the next day, my friends, and I've taken the rubber off of here, and I thought I'd show you I fixed my boo-boo right there. You can probably see it slightly on the face, but very slightly. You gotta look, and I haven't sanded it yet, so it's just rough. I think once it's sanded, you won't even be able to see it, but you know, keep in mind the heel will cover the face of that. On the edge, you really can't even see it, and that's the only thing you'll be able to see after the heel's on there anyway. So, you know, it looks good enough to me. I don't think anybody would ever know, and it's glued with wood glue and it's wood binding, so it's never coming loose. I'm not worried about it at all. Okay, on the other end, I started cleaning this up, and that's what the first piece is going to look like going in there. And that's just loosely fitted in there, and you can see how that just turns the corner there. The bevel, you know, that angle or that inside purfling turns a 45, I guess it's a 90 really, but each piece is 45. So there you go. Got to make another piece of that, stick it in here, and then we'll see what now by the way, that's just, it's in there tight, but you know, you can see that it just sticking in there dry. But that's the way I like to fit them. If they'll fit that tight dry, then when you glue them, then everything's really nice. So I got to fit one more piece in here and get that fitted up. I'll do most of that off camera. I'll maybe show you a little bit of my process, but here we go. The way I start fitting up something like this is I square off the end real good. I put just a rough 45 on there, and when I say rough, I do mean it's just kind of rough. I just kind of guess at it. And I slide it up here, and then I start looking at how close it is. And you can see there we got a little problem. It's not working out just right, but it's close, you know. I mean, if a guy glued it in there like that, hardly anybody would really notice it, but it's just not right, you know. The first problem is this one here is, this 45 is too long, which I left it long on purpose so that I could trim it back. And so that's what I do, and again, it's awkward here to try to do this on camera, but I just more or less just take a really sharp chisel and just start trimming it back. And one of the key things about trimming things like this that's going to show is you trim it with an undercut. In other words, you cut the bottom of it deeper than the top. That way you can sneak up on it a little bit more too. And the bottom down there where the glue and the creeping crud is down in here in the corner, then it won't stop the joint from going together, see, if you cut that away. And the same way with the piece you're putting in there. You leave the top kind of proud of the bottom. In other words,
I would file the bottom away a little bit more. And in this particular case, it's exactly opposite right now, so I need to fix that. So the way I fix that is I actually slope my file, and I'm exaggerating it, but I actually slope my file with an undercut. I'm not going to do it that much of an undercut, but it will be an undercut. And then that way, the top can touch perfectly. Same way on the end. I'll do the end with a slight undercut. And that lets the top slide right to the joint then perfectly. You can probably see it's closer. Whoops, it's caught me up there. It's never easy on camera, but you can probably see that's closer. If I can hold it, it's trying to fall out of my arms. And I'll just keep working on that like that off camera because it's just too awkward to turn it around and let you see it. But I will get that piece fitted in there like I've got this piece fitted, and then I'll show you what that looks like before we move to the next step. This is the way I prefer to work, with this down between my knees like this. That way it's right at the right height. I can sit down and look at it. And now I thought, well, since I've got it in this position, the camera can see it actually easier. So I thought I'd just go ahead and turn the camera back on and let you see it. You can see that's pretty darn tight now. Everything looks like it matches up pretty well. So because of that, I think I'm actually ready to start working on this end. Now, you need to mark a couple of things. Like here, this is where the 45 will start. So I'm marking that here, and I'm marking the angle approximately so I don't accidentally mess up. And I'm also marking the length, and I'm trying to mark it very accurately, but I'll leave the pencil mark. And so that way I can sneak up on it again and just take a little bit at a time until it fits perfectly. So now I've got my pencil marks there, and I'll leave all those marks. You know, in other words, I'll cut on this side, on the waist side of those marks. And so we're going to go do that right now. I'm not going to show that, but that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go over to the bandsaw, cut that off. I'll cut, with the bandsaw, I'll cut it even a little bit big. And then I'll use the sander to sneak up on the mark. And my first attempt at this is not too bad, but it's still quite long. You know, I left it long intentionally, of course. And I can see I'm going to need to cut back a little bit more, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Now this one's also long, the one that's on the guitar already. And maybe before I get too much further along, I'll go ahead and cut it back just a tiny bit, because it's quite long. I'm still going to leave it a hair long, but that'll get me a little closer. Each thing gets you just a little bit closer. Actually, that's looking pretty good. When I start from this end and go down, it's actually matching up pretty good already. So, but I've already got this end as good as I want it, so I'll do all the work from this end still. But at least my angle looks good and my end cut looks good. So if I just shorten them a little bit, both of them, then we're going to be real close. So I'll do that again off camera. Each time I test it, I go back and I put it back in there and look and see. And you can see there, maybe I've just darkened the edge with some pencil. And that way, that gives me a gauge. If you don't have anything as a gauge, when you start pushing this into the sander, you don't really know how far you've pushed it. But with that little tiny thin pencil mark there, I could take all the pencil mark or half the pencil mark or whatever. It gives me a gauge. It's a real good trick for doing detail work. I think that looks pretty good. So that time there, when I snuck up on it, it just fit right in there. Now, I'll be honest, this one's not quite as tight as this one, but it's tight enough, I think. I don't think it'll be a problem. And by the time you put the glue on it, that also swells the wood up just a teeny bit, and I think it'll be just perfect, really. And now we've got a center strip, and what I'm going to do there, before I get too far along, is I'm going to measure that and make sure it's approximately the same, because I want it to be pretty close. I don't want this center strip to be, you know, top wide at one end and narrow at the other. And, you know, I doubt it's perfect by any stretch, because nothing ever is, but let's see how close it is. So we're at, now we'll measure this in thousandths of inches. So approximately 5/88 there, and it's going to be less down here, I think. It's about 580. Yeah, see, I can tell it's just a tiny bit narrower down here. And I think that there may be something holding this out. And it may be this 45 right here, because it doesn't look like I'm as tight as I could be. So I think I'm going to trim this 45 right here just a little bit. And I think that might make the difference. I mean, 8 thousandths is tiny, tiny, tiny amount. It sounds like a lot, but it is tiny, trust me. Wow, that messed it up actually. Somehow that cut off way more than I thought I was cutting off. I honestly don't know what happened there. Oh, I know what happened there. I got it turned around the wrong way. Okay, that's what happened there. Now it fits. See, that's the difference of the undercuts. Now it fits fine. I thought, I didn't cut that much away. That looked really strange. I thought, how did it do that? Yeah, that's perfect now. That's really close. So I'm going to call that good. Well, let's just see if that made the difference on the width here. It probably did. It brought it a little bit closer. Well, yeah, it's really close. Now 586.87 to 588.89 up there. So, yeah, we're only 2 or 3 thousandths off. Not very many people can see 2 or 3 thousandths over that length. Trust me. That's pretty close. A human hair is about 4 thousandths, so you figure you're only less than that, like half of that or approximately off between here and there. That's close enough for my woodworking. We'll see what we can do about getting that glued up now, I think. I don't see any reason to hold off on it. I might as well get that glued up, and then we'll fit this other piece in there and make it fit nice and tight, nice and snug. Let's just go ahead and move on to that step then. That looks pretty good. We'll get this one glued. I'm going to make sure I don't turn this one around because I know it won't fit the other way. We already know that, don't we? That's looking pretty darn good now. I'll get some water and clean that up and I'll show you what it looks like. So there you go. It's fit in there just perfectly. Couldn't really get it any better. Cleaned it up with some water there just to make it look good. And maybe you can see the detail of the corners there turning and everything. And of course they're not sanded yet. Once they're sanded, I think they'll look even better. You know, it's all rough right at the moment. And my able-bodied assistant over there came up with a pretty good line. I said, when I told you that this 2 or 3 thousandths is less than a human hair, he says, yeah, you are definitely splitting hairs. And then he says, not very often do you say that, and you can say that it literally means you're splitting a hair. And really, we are literally splitting a hair here. That's the difference between the thickness, width here and the width there. It's about roughly half the thickness of a human hair difference. So that's close enough for my woodworking, and if it was any better than this, it would be perfect, and then it wouldn't look like I did it, so we'll just stop right there. Well, my friends, we have actually gone a step further and we made this centerpiece. Now, we actually cut a whole bunch of test pieces first and kept adjusting and adjusting and adjusting. And so then we had this last little scrap of, this is actually a scrap piece of rosewood that just barely, and I mean like by that much, was big enough to make this. And so we thought, well, we'll just run that through as a test piece. And if we can make a piece out, I mean, if it turns out, great. If it don't, no big deal. It's a test piece because it was seriously barely big enough. And it just worked out where I think it's perfect. I think my test piece now is the piece. I really like it. It fits beautifully. We will fill the engraving here. We'll fill that with white, I think, later. And but I think that fits so well that I don't see any point in reinventing the wheel and making another one. Now the only problem is, can I get it out of there? That's, you know, I also, you know, beveled the edges so that you can, there you go. So you basically, you force it down in there is what you're doing. And I'm gonna clean it up just a teeny bit more off camera, just the beveling part, I mean, and then we're gonna force it in there with some glue and call it good enough, because that's, you know, it just really fits it like a glove, just as perfect as it could possibly, you want it to fit. I think I'm gonna glue her in place. And I would do that if the glue would squirt out, but since it doesn't, I'll just put way more in there than I need, because you know, you want the thing you guys don't realize is you really want to make as big a mess on everything you do. It just enhances the whole process. Makes you feel so much better about it when you get it all cleaned up. So anyway, got more than enough glue there. The bigger the mess you make, the better you feel about it when you're finished, because you just know that you've cleaned up such a mess. Oh, that's nice. That's a really nice fit. I mean, seriously, you could try all day and never get it to fit any better than that. That's like perfect. My able-bodied assistant basically did all that on the laser cutter for me. And I can do it, he just can do it a little faster, so it's just that much better. You know, dang kids and technology, you know how that is. That's beautiful. That's really nice. That's really, really nice. Take a look at that up close. Isn't that pretty? Yeah. Like I said, if it was any better than that, it'd be perfect, and then it sure wouldn't look like I did it. So I'm gonna stop right there, because that's just where it ought to be.